Vinaka, and good evening. Welcome to the show. With COVID-19, we've seen many changes being made to the education sector. There's been distance learning that had to be implemented from primary school and even into the high school education system. And the most important one is the tertiary education sector. Now, with us tonight, we've got guests from the USP's Vice Chancellor, Professor Pal Ahluwalia, and also the USP's Acting Deputy Vice Chancellor, and also he is responsible for learning and teaching, Professor Chito Vanua Lailai. Good evening and welcome to the show, sir. Before we get straight into everything that we have to discuss tonight, let's look at USP and how they've had to adapt to the changes that have been made, especially with COVID-19. Now, of course, this is something that had been anticipated, but not something that you would have had to implement quite so quickly. When were contingency plans for learning and also for assessments made for the USP?
Bulavinaka Geraldine, it's a pleasure to be here with you this evening. I think we were very early movers, and we knew things were happening overseas. We're keeping a very close eye on what was happening with COVID-19, and I was very blessed that I have a very good team, and we started planning very early about what we would do. And so I think well before the March the 12th, when the WHO actually announced that this was a global pandemic, we'd already prepared a plan for USP, a strategic plan of how we would handle the pandemic. And as you know, we operate in 12 countries. So our remit is very different. We were not just worried about what was happening in Fiji, but we were worried about all our other countries. And of course, the paramount thing for us is always our students' health and safety. And so we had a very clear plan with different stages, which replicated probably some of our governments. And, you know, stage one was what would happen if this happened. Stage two was, you know, if campuses were shut, what would happen. Stage three was if there was a complete lockdown, what would the university do? What would we start doing to prepare? And then, you know, stage four is how do we reopen campuses when everything, you know, when the pandemic is over. So I think we had a very strategic plan, and we've stuck to this plan. And we've been very observant about government directives from all our 12 governments, because of course governments have the ultimate know-how and the knowledge of what's best for the citizens. So we've been taking our lead from the government, but having our own plan, which also then, you know, went into the other sections in terms of what will we do in terms of teaching and learning, what will we do about other things on campus, because we have a as I've said, you know, we have a multi-jurisdictional university which operates with residential students, with all kinds of things, which we are a large community within, you know, within the cities where we operate.
Professor Chito, now with what has happened in the past couple of months, of course the university had already been in operation, semester one had already started off, and then changes had to be implemented with your designation being responsible for learning and teaching. Talk to us about how these changes had to be implemented and what was the process like, what was the reception like?
Okay, thank you very much for that. What was always paramount in our mind, and is still paramount in our mind, is the continuity of education of our students. That is very, very important. We realize that if we don't fall back on our 30 years of experience in distance and flexible learning and utilize that experience for the benefit of our students, then we would have failed our students, we would have failed our stakeholders, we would have failed our parents. So with the leadership of the Vice Chancellor, we get together our team and think carefully and like I said, with the central focus on the continuity of the education of our students. So with 30 years of experience behind us with respect to the distance flexible learning, we went right ahead and migrate all our face-to-face courses. There are about 300 face-to-face courses that we have. And just imagine, you know, with the COVID-19 impact, trying to get these courses to the online mode as soon as possible. And that's why we are so fortunate that we've got this 30 years of experience behind us. It took us not that much time in order to migrate our face-to-face courses to online and have our lecturers prepare themselves for remote teaching and get our resources in place to benefit our students for remote learning as well. And so we prepare both our staff and our students at the same time, telling our students that this is going to be a kind of a new mode of learning from face-to-face to remote learning and teaching.
Professor Pal, so the USP prides itself in being a premier tertiary education institution, and if you were to tell us how USP has fared in delivering on services during the COVID-19 pandemic in the past couple of months, what would you say?
Look, I'm so proud of what our staff have been able to accomplish. As Professor Jito has just explained, we had to migrate some courses, but we were very lucky. For example, our law degree is predominantly online anyway, so a lot of people were able to really adapt very quickly, and we were lucky that the major blunt of the impact came during our mid-semester break, so we could actually extend our mid-semester break slightly and make sure that we gave our staff time to be able to adapt very quickly. And as Jito said, we really took that history behind us, and we've made such an impact that all our courses are now available, and we're making sure that our students' education is not affected. I suppose the biggest difference now is that we do realize that many of our students are not able to connect seamlessly as they would be if they were on one of our campuses, which means that what we've done is we've taken certain measures, including making sure that we've been able to get work with Digicel, work with Vodafone, so that it doesn't cost our students any money when they connect to USP.
Off camera, you had mentioned that you take a very hands-on approach in trying to figure out what the atmosphere is really like. What was student engagement like during semester one?
Look, this was one of the best years we had to begin with. There was such a vibrancy on our campuses. We had a massive growth in student numbers. I think in our faculties we're close to 13% growth. And again, this is something which we don't take lightly, because I think higher education is a real gift, and this is where I'd really like to thank the Fiji government for what it's done. TELS has been a game changer for our communities. It means that we've gone from elite education to mass education, and that everybody has a right to have a quality education. So I think what we've been able to do is to make sure that we provide that kind of vibrancy, and we create the learning environment, and that we were well prepared to serve our students, because I think that's ultimately what our job is, not just to educate them, but also to serve them. And so I think that's been we were doing so well, when COVID affected the semester. But we have little doubt that when things, when whatever the normal is that we return to, that we will continue to deliver what we've done so well.
And very quickly before we go to break, if you were to gauge satisfaction levels, would you say that they were at a good level, or had they fallen?
I think before COVID hit, our satisfaction levels were very high. And I think after the break, we can talk about what the measures we've taken to ensure that our students are connected, are engaged with us, and that they get the best education possible.
Join us for more right after this break. Welcome back. Professor Paul, we were talking about satisfaction levels with students now, of course, and not just with education that you are providing. It's also about gauging customer satisfaction, because at the end of the day, the USP is running a business. You had said, or you had alluded to the fact that because of COVID-19, there may have been a drop in satisfaction levels. And if you could talk to us about how you've put in place measures to try and keep up that particular standard that USP is well known for, what would you say?
So I want to right at the outset emphasize that standards have not changed anyway. And there's also kind of a myth that, which I want to clear before I really come to your question, which is really that, online teaching somehow is not as intense or as good or, some way, somehow secondary. The reality is that online teaching is very resource intensive because our lecturers and our teachers and professors at the moment are spending far more time responding to students. In many ways, it's almost like you're starting to get individual students are getting far more attention than they would get simply in a lecture theatre.
Almost like a mentorship
Yeah,
program.
it is a very much a mentorship. So I think the dissatisfaction that has happened is really not USP's making, but it has to do with that we live in a region where, while in our major centres, especially in Fiji, we have very good internet connectivity. Across the region, some of our countries don't have that same internet connectivity, and while we can deliver that from our campuses, when there was a complete lockdown, it was very difficult for people to access, particularly if you're in a remote area or if you're in a remote part of Fiji. Now, I think we are really trying to work to make that easier. And I think I'd like to ask Jito, especially, to talk about the initiatives he's taken to combat this.
Yes, absolutely. As I mentioned earlier, the focus really is on the continuity of education of our students. We cannot afford to stop. We realized when the COVID-19 impact started to take effect, the last thing on our mind was to think about closing the university. That would not be a good way to go forward, again, really because of our students. So falling back on our 30 years of experience, we realized that the best thing that we can do is to help our students as much as we can with online resources. So we began to put into place several initiatives. For example, we distributed around 700 tablets across in this case, because we're going to take the tablets to the region, so we distributed the tablets in Fiji. And not only that, we set up a call center. It really should be a crisis center, but we call it a call center because we want to talk to our students. When we are in face-to-face mode, our students feel close with their lecturers. There's closeness with their friends at the university. There's much more intimacy between our lecturers and between human beings in general. But with online, it can become very impersonal. And without that daily conversation going on, our students can fail. So we want to create that environment. We set up the call center. We call our students up almost on a daily basis. Those who we see are falling behind in their studies. We call them up and check with them what's happening, in which way we can help. So we've set up a call center, and we look into our data, we look into the level of participation of our students via online mode, and when we see that some of our students are falling behind, we call them up and just check what's happening. And so this is the purpose of setting up the call center. And that's one of the initiatives that we are taking. Of course, the other initiatives that we are taking include bulk SMS. We've got 27,000 students across the region. So with bulk SMS, we are able to reach those students as well, and just checking with them again what's happening.
There is a slight setback, though, because certain programs and courses do require on-hand and also face-to-face and on-site training, especially with some certain courses, like, say, for example, with tourism and hospitality, where they would need to be on-site to probably carry out some scenarios of doing tasks or assessments, and also with courses like, say, for example, biology or with chemistry, where they'll need to be in labs. How have you worked your way around that?
You're absolutely right. These courses, these are the critical components of these courses, lab and field work, and we cannot do without those components. So what we're doing is that in some cases, it is possible to do a virtual simulation. Yes? For example, in chemistry or in biology and physics, it is possible to actually create a virtual environment and have the students doing a virtual experiment. So that's one way we're looking at it. With respect to fieldwork, we've just we just have to wait till time is right and have our students go out in the field. In the meantime, we're concentrating on the theoretical aspect of the course, and then hopefully towards the end of the year, perhaps when the environment is right, then we'll carry out the other components as well.
And very quickly before
Yes.
we go to break, looking at how assessments will be made for those particular
Right.
courses where you'll have to defer field work.
That's right, yeah.
How would that work?
Yes, so we have in place in our system, our assessment system, grades such as I, which means incomplete. So we'll have that grade while we wait for the right time in order to finalize that component, for example, like fieldwork. That's correct.
That's absolutely correct. I think for us, flexibility is the order of the day. We're being absolutely flexible because we know that students need that flexibility at the moment, and we're doing everything in our power. And I think this call center, which I'd like to share with everybody, the number to call this call center is 1568. I think, you know, it's toll free. Our students can just call if they're having any difficulties. But as Professor Tito said, we're also calling them. We're making sure that, you know, our students are engaged and that we can help them in any way.
Thank you very much. We'll be back with more after this break. Welcome back. Now, this is the third segment, so let's look at something that is of utmost importance for anyone who is an academic or someone who is in the learning system, looking at examinations, because that is how you assess whether or not that person has failed or passed with all of the learning that they have done in the past couple of years. If you were to tell us about how USP is going to carry on with examinations if this COVID-19 pandemic drags on, what would you say?
So Geraldine, that's a very good question because of course, you know, we want to make sure that our students are going to have the learning outcomes that we want them to have, which we talked to them about at the beginning of their, you know, it's like a contract between the university and the students. So this year, obviously, normally I think we have, you know, extensive venues where we have graduations and there's thousands of students in these. We can't do that. So we have actually made the decision that we have to find other ways of assessing our students. And a lot of these will be done through ongoing assessments. A lot of it will be going through tests online. And I'd like Jito to expand on that because I think this is something that he has worked with. He's set up a learning and teaching continuity team at the university. And it's through that we have been setting up some new ways of making sure that our students get assessed properly.
We'd love to hear from you about that.
Yeah, absolutely. The COVID-19 restrictions mean that we cannot have face-to-face examinations. We've got classes that have 300 students, 200 students, and so it is impossible, therefore, to have face-to-face examinations. So when I set up the Learning and Teaching Continuity team, which is populated by the representative of the academic sections of the university and the support sections of the university, we discussed very, exactly this issue about what to do with the final examinations. And so we decided to have the assessment that is flexible, that instead of having a final examination component, we spread out the assessment throughout the semester.
And that would, in return, get rid of the examinations altogether?
That's right. Which would consist of, for example, assignments, yeah? And small online tests, short online tests, and so forth, in such a way that at the end of the day, it basically sums up to having a final examination. So in that way, being flexible allows us to avoid having that very difficult final examination at the end of.
But I also just point out, Geraldine, that we have a lot of accredited programs at USP, and we're very proud of these international accreditations. And some of those require examinations. So we've been working with the accrediting bodies, make sure that their requirements are fulfilled. But also in some courses, we will have to wait and have some examinations. We're finding all ways and alternative ways to do this. And we're just making sure that we, because the last thing we want to do is let students do something and then the accreditation body says, oh, well, we're not going to let you do that.
And the
so
one
we
day
have to meet their requirements as well.
So that one day that all students are looking forward to, which is graduation day, when all of their assessments, all of their examinations, their grading, all comes to a culmination of them walking up and receiving their certificates of completion. How has that changed? Of course, we've had the cancellation of the graduation ceremony. There were a lot of disgruntled people, but of course there was nothing that could be done about it. If you could talk to us about that.
So of course, as I've said earlier, our students and staff's health and safety is paramount, as is our parents. When anybody comes to anything that we do at USP, we become responsible for them. So we couldn't do that, and it was very short notice, unfortunately, once the pandemic had been announced. And government had started making certain announcements, that we had decided in the end that the best thing was not to have graduations. But we were very quick to make sure that those students who had already got gowns, etc., could return them. We also made sure, because people want to get that parchment so that they can, take it to employers, they can show that, they've actually graduated. Mm-hmm. We made sure that whoever needed that straight away got it. Mm-hmm. But we've also left the door open, because we know that these are such family events. We know that graduation is not just about the person, it's about an event for the family. And so what we've done is we've said that at our next set of graduations, depending on when we'll be permitted to have something like that, they will be all allowed to return and graduate with all the pomp and ceremony that's entailed in a graduation.
Professor Cheetal, if you could bring it back to assessments and also learning.
Right.
You had mentioned something about hubs being set up in certain areas in Fiji to help out students with their learning.
That's right. But before that, if you don't mind, let me just go back to the earlier topic on the final examination. As the Pal mentioned, that in some courses, the final examination, face-to-face final examination, is compulsory. It must be done because of the requirements of accreditation. And so we've just had, for example, the MBA tri-semester 1 final examination just a few weeks back. So what we did was to have several classrooms and make sure that we have these COVID-19 restrictions followed, where we place less than 20 students per classroom. And in that way, we manage the entire, the entire final examination as well. So that's another way of ensuring that we also meet the COVID-19 restrictions. And back to this what we call remote resource center, computer hubs, basically. The call center that we have set up, as I mentioned, we call the students on a daily basis. We track their performance online, and if they are not, for example, logging in for over 2 weeks, for example, then we call them up and see what's happening. From the feedback we have, one of the major issues is internet accessibility. In some areas, internet cannot reach those areas. And that's about 50% of our feedback. Students are saying, sorry, we cannot have an internet access nearby. We have to go to some place to have some reasonable internet accessibility. Now, looking at the data, we realize that the majority of our students between Suva and Nosori, they're having that problem. They could be in a village somewhere and they could not access the internet. So we have decided now to open up computer hubs. We're taking now the education to our students, because that's important. So the first thing that we'll do, we'll set up a computer hub at the new Hexagon building that is between Suva and Nosori, and we'll place about 30 to 50 computers there. And so our students can then come if they are experiencing this difficulty of accessing the internet.
Is there a time frame that you can give us when this will be set up?
We've just now negotiating with the owners of that building about the rental, but it should be maybe within the next 2 weeks. We should be able to set up the hub as soon as possible.
Thank you for that. Join us for more after the break. Welcome back. Professor Pal, let's look at USP's financial position. That is something that a lot of people have been whispering about, wondering whether or not USP is in a stable condition to be able to continue the way that it's been so far. There have also been concerns about whether or not there have been any staff layoffs, if there's been any pay cuts for members as well. Can you talk to us about that?
So Geraldine, as you know, this is having a major impact on higher education across the world. Just last week I was reading the Times Higher Education, and one of the things that I'd like to share with you is that in 2018, the total surplus for all universities in Australia was 4.8 billion. 20 of those 40 universities have declared the financial position this year, and 3.6 billion of that 4.88 billion has been wiped out. And the reason is predominantly because of the dependence on international students that Australia has. Now, we're lucky that, we are a regional university, that, our 12 governments are very supportive and have been providing enormous support. And we have 2 development partners, principally Australia and New Zealand, that have give us direct budgetary support. So I think we're very lucky. We've been cushioned by that support. But of course, we have to be very prudent, and we have been doing a lot of financial modeling and financial scenarios of what happens, which is why we're really pushing to make sure that our students come back. Our 50% of our budget is dependent on student fees. So, we are making sure that side of things is taken care of. But we've also made sure that we are being very careful with what we spend. So, for example, so far this year, we're very lucky. We have normally, for a university that operates in 12 countries, we do travel a lot, try to deliver things to our students all over the region. All of that has stopped. Our focus has now been on putting resources into technology-intensive initiatives. But by and large, we've been able to control our expenditure, and we have scenarios of what happens. Now, I'm very proud of 2 things. One, that my senior management colleagues have already taken a pay cut voluntarily, to demonstrate how seriously we take this. And one of the measures that we've done is all our staff this year, our unions have been working very cooperatively with management. We've decided for this year alone, for 2020, nobody will get more than 10 vacation days, as normally they would get, some people get 25 and others would get 20 in a year. So we're restricting things like that. We're making sure people take their leave. We're making sure that a lot of our capex expenditure, which we normally would do, is all on hold, because we won't know the full impact on the university's finances till about July, when the student numbers for the second semester will be known. So we're taking every measure to protect the institution's finances. As I said, so far we've been very, very lucky that our governments have really supported us. And I see no reason why they won't. This is the future of our region's, students and our region's children. Their education is paramount, and I think the governments have been very good at supporting us for many years.
Now, I noticed that you said that your senior members of staff had taken a voluntary pay cut. Would you be at liberty to discuss what the percentage was like?
Yeah, so if I actually look at the 3 different measures that we've taken across, it all adds up to about 15% of the senior management's salary.
And of course, the second phase that a lot of people would probably anticipate is staff layoff. Has that already happened, or is that in place should things worsen?
Well, I'm very confident that if we do everything that we're doing now, and this is again a plea to all our students, please use 1568, our toll-free number. Get engaged with us. We can avert a lot of any kind of staff layoffs, etc. And I'm pretty confident that if we continue on the path we're on, we've been very flexible with our students. We're going to probably in the second semester, once our council approves this, we've made a recommendation that our students' fees be cut by at least 10%. To make it easier. We know people in our community are suffering. But we also know that between us and FNU, we are probably one of the largest employers. And if we lay off employees, this will have a really detrimental effect on our communities. Because, as you know, it's not just one person whose job gets lost. it's actually a whole community that it gets affected. So I'm pretty confident, Geraldine, that if all the measures we're taking at the moment, that we can actually, survive this, dependent on contributions from our government.
And it's prudent to also look at the fact that, like you mentioned, there have been job layoffs in other sectors, and that has directly affected students' ability to pay off their tuition fees and other fees that they owe to the USP. With all of that in mind, has the USP got any plans in place to sort of give them extensions or give them any leeway, any sort of space where they can make provisions to pay once they get financially stable and they're able to repay or at least pay the USP what it is that they owe?
Yes, Geraldine, we're doing that. Normally, we would have insisted that all fees be paid by now for first semester. We've actually said that until the assessment period is over, nobody needs to panic about that. And then, we are also trying to make provisions through our council that, we can actually create an installments type of situation where our students can pay, so that, we know that communities are suffering. We know their parents, in many cases, are unable to come up with the finance that are required. And as I said, we're seriously planning on some reductions. So I think all this augurs well for our students to come back, to engage. And with that, I think the university can really deliver what I think is its core mission, which is to deliver really quality education for our people.
Professor Chito, let's look at the halls of residence. Of course, it must be very quiet on campus right now, especially with most of the students not being in the halls of residence as we speak. If you could talk to us about the current status of the occupants right now, what would it be?
Well, in fact, the halls of residence is actually full, because when the COVID-19 restrictions came into being, our students cannot travel.
And these are students
these are regional students.
Yes.
That's right. These are regional students. So they cannot travel. They could not travel to their islands, back home. So they stayed on campus. In fact, during the entire lockdown period, almost all of our students were on campus. Up to about 500 of our students were in campus, and we had to make sure of their welfare. Making sure that they follow the COVID-19 restrictions and so forth. And yeah, so it is actually our residence actually full with all our students.
What about local students that were occupying those rooms as well?
Yes.
Were they sent home?
That's right. Now, we require them, in order to minimize the number of students on campus. We requested our Fijian students to go back home. And but the majority of them have come back, and maybe only about 50 of those students have not returned, because some of them are in the islands and they couldn't come over.
And is there an assurance for their spots still being available for them once everything sort of goes back to normal, so to speak?
Maybe I'll just turn to VC in this case, because he would know the details.
Yeah. So I think what we're doing is, we obviously wanted as many of our halls of residence to be full. So those students that we gave them an option on the 20th of April, we said, if you don't want to return, we'll store all your belongings, and that we will try and make sure that we can. We had a lot of students from the region in other parts of Suva, because we don't have enough halls of residence. So some of them have also moved into our campuses, but we will absolutely try, when everything opens, that we will accommodate all our students who want to return. We do have rooms available now, so we're pretty confident that we can accommodate whoever wants to come back.
Stay with us. After the break, our final segment. Welcome back. Professor Powell, this is our final segment. Let's look at semester one. If you were to give us a rundown of how it's been, and also to see what's going to happen in semester two as USP progresses.
So Geraldine, as you know, semester one was interrupted in week 7, unfortunately. I think, again, I want to say, we are probably very lucky that we live in a region where there's hardly any coronavirus anywhere in our region. I think there are 3 cases left in Fiji, but other than that, and no new cases have come for at least over a month. So I think we're very lucky that the governments of our region and all the rest of the 11 countries where USP operates have managed this crisis exceptionally well. This means that we will probably be in a position where shortly I'm anticipating we'll be able to resume a normal semester 2 as semester 1 will finish online. And it's at that point, even though there might not be inter-island travel between our various countries for a while, we will continue to deliver to our students in the other countries remotely. And so we will have face-to-face at our Lothala campus, but then we will continue to have online teaching for everybody else wherever possible. But of course we have a campus in Lautoka and we have a campus in Lambasa. And so they'll also be able to operate normally. We're pretty confident that it will happen. But as I've said, our key at the moment is flexibility. And if need be, if something happens, we are fully prepared to be online, but we will just even possibly extend our academic year all the way to December the 18th. And depending on what happens with our Fiji and all our regional students who graduate from high school, we might have to be very flexible about even when our academic year will begin next year.
If we were to look at the expatriation of some of USP's staff, especially since depending on which semester that they come in to do their teaching for certain courses, looking at semester 2, is there any plans in place for those who are currently not in Fiji and how they'll be able to continue with teaching their courses? So
we have very few staff in that position, because most of our staff, wherever they were, are resident in those countries and they've chosen to stay. There are very few of our staff who left, but those who have gone are continuing to teach online, because that's been one of our advantages, that they can teach online. So we're very confident that our students will not be affected in any way. For those students who may have opted to drop out of semester 1 halfway, maybe because of financial difficulties or maybe because of other reasons, if they choose to come back and be reabsorbed by USP, would that be possible? Absolutely. So one of the things we've done is that, maybe Jito will expand on this, one of the things we have done is we've said to our students, we're very flexible. For those courses where you have a prerequisite, you don't have to actually, for this year alone, we'll have a waiver of that, which means that they can come in, continue, and then we're going to try and have a lot of flexi schools to try and make up our students who might have fallen behind, both here and in the region. But I think it's something that Jito's team is working on, so it'd be good to hear from him on this. Yeah, that's right. The COVID-19 impact has really, affected our students psychologically as well. And of course financially as well, and we are aware of being aware of this. We tried to put into place several initiatives, and one of those, as Paul mentioned, is that how they can continue into semester 2. So if they fail in semester 1, then we allow them to continue as usual, without having those units to kind of restrict the moving ahead in semester 2. And so we waiver the prerequisites from that perspective. Also, we planning for those students who cannot make it in semester 1, we're planning to have flexi schools towards the end of the year, even online flexi schools for the students. Would you be able to answer this? Are you expecting a decline in the number of students that would be registering for courses in semester 2? That is yes, we accept that it is possible that there would be a decline in the number of students. Because as we look around our country, we can see that people have been laid off from their work. And so it has a cascading effect on the economy, and therefore we expect that there will be some reduction in the number of students. If you were to clarify whether or not this would have an impact on whether these courses would continue, because you need to have a quota of students per certain course. That's right, yes. What would you say? Yeah, like I said, it's a cascading effect on our business, on our delivery of courses. If the number of students fallen, then we may have to force to actually close. Maybe I could say a bit about this, Geraldine. I mean, I think we're very confident at the moment, and which is why we've put all these measures in place to try and attract our students. These are unknowns, but all we can do is try and mitigate against the risk. It is a risk that students might not come back, but there is no reason for students not to come back, and that's why as I've said, we've set up this call center. If students are in that situation where they're feeling vulnerable, they need to speak to us. We've got to be very flexible, make some adjustments. The key point is that we will try and get as many of our students back. We will continue. We're confident that we can operate, we can function, we can really continue doing what we do best. So although there's a risk, I think that we have really mitigated against this risk. So I just want to reassure all our students again, and all our parents and our communities, that please, get in touch with USP. There is nothing to fear. We know people are doing it hard, but we are here to help, and we will be as flexible as we can. As I've said, we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that we help our communities and we help our students.
Are there any plans that USB had in place for 2020 that have had to be shelved because of the COVID-19 pandemic?
Of course, as I said earlier, we have not spent money on our CAPEX, which is really our construction of. We were to build a civil engineering building. We've put that on hold. We have what is called a strategic plan, and we have certain funds allocated towards that. We've put that on hold. And that's to make sure that we can continue to do what is our core business, which is to deliver, as I've said time and time again, a quality education for our students. And again, if I can say, don't hesitate to contact us on 1568. It's a toll-free number.
We're almost at the end of our show, so if you were to give the students and the parents and guardians out there an outline of when semester 2 will be beginning and when registration needs to start and when it ends, please feel free to do so.
Yes, so our registration has begun. We are encouraging people to register early. We're making sure that you'll probably see even this weekend there's been a marketing blitz in our newspapers. We're open for business. We want our people to come back. There is no reason, and there's nothing better than having an education in hard economic times, because that's something that will stay with you for life.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for coming on the show. Join us again next week. Kanaka.